Good morning, Dan and Amy. I've long said that, and this pre-COVID-19,
Okay,
that
what?
Illinois isn't so much a state as it is a Kafka novel, maybe even a death cult. And maybe death cult is a better description given the policies that have been promulgated at the state and the city level, city of Chicago level, during COVID-19, including the proclamation yesterday from Governor Pritzker about youth sports against the backdrop of a statement by CDC Director Robert Redfield. What's happening in high schools, for example, those excess suicide deaths that were predicted in a study by the Wellbeing Trust just a few weeks ago. 75,000 was what the study predicted. Excess deaths attributed to suicide and addiction because of lockdown policies. And part of lockdown policies is the elimination or severe restriction of sports, which is what's the protocol in Illinois.
But there has been another cost that we've seen, particularly in high schools. We're seeing, sadly, far greater suicides now than we are deaths from COVID. We're seeing far greater deaths from drug overdose that are above excess, that what we had as background, than we are seeing deaths from COVID.
I can believe it. And all those parents yesterday celebrating, oh, they just moved football and soccer and girls volleyball to the spring. Oh, it's just a few more months. And then in just a few months, they're going to push it back again. And then it's going to be canceled.
Well, it's consistent.
So there's a lot of hopelessness out there, Dan.
It's consistent. And by the way, the deaths, so-called deaths of despair, not just young people, but older professional people who ruined economically. When you are ruined economically, we see suicide rates go up. This has been long studied. Corresponding to the unemployment rate, you see the incremental increase in suicide rates. And, of course, with locking down businesses, taking people's businesses effectively in some respects, that also exacerbates the body count. I don't know how else to describe it.
I mean, these kids are worried about the disease. They're worried about civil unrest, unemployment. One of my players, both of her parents lost their jobs. I mean, there's so much despair out there, and they have no hope. This is the one thing they were looking forward to was fall sports.
Well, there's sort of a self-delusion that's been going on in Illinois for a long time, and so it's applied to the pandemic response. The self-delusion is sort of can encapsulate in the phrase you just used, just a little bit more, just a little bit longer. So the tax increase is just a little bit more, just a little bit longer, just a little bit bigger, just a little bit of this, and just a little bit of that. It's only a 1 percentage point increase. It's only a 5 percentage point increase. It's only 50 cents a day. It's only $100 a month.
Only 3 cents a soda pop.
It's only a bag tax. It's only a soda tax. It's only a 1% pension sweetener. It's only this. It's not that bad. We're only doing this. We're only doing that. It's just a little bit more. It's just a little bit longer. Well, that's how you become the worst governed state in the history of America, as far as I'm concerned. And I think I can make a strong case, as I have many times, based on the numbers, starting with the fact that we have the worst credit rating of any state, not just in the nation, but of any state in the nation since Michael Dukakis was governor of Massachusetts.
Congratulations, Illinois.
And the only thing even propping up our ability to borrow, as we saw most recently, to continue to try to keep this house of cards upright, is things like the municipal facility the Fed set up so that Illinois could still go out to the bond market to get $1.2 billion to pay for groceries it bought in 1987, which is the way we finance this state. For more on tax-happy Illinois and the sadness it inflicts and will continue to, we're pleased to be joined by Professor John McGinnis. He's a contributing editor of City Journal, Manhattan Institute's publication, and the George C. Dix Professor in Constitutional Law at Northwestern University. Professor McGinnis, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
You suggest, you focus in your piece about Illinois on the unfunded pension obligations, which is the good place to focus because that's the majority of the debt burden that the state carries. Address the issue of the need for a right sizing of pension benefits in this state. And my question to you is, it doesn't seem like there's much desire for it to come from elected leaders in either party. there hasn't been much movement for the better part of the last decade. Uh, what about the prospect that's been debated for some time now, where you had a federal bankruptcy court judge, since states can't declare bankruptcy and there's no interest in doing that in Illinois anyway, where you had a federal bankruptcy court judge say, states, there's no provision in the federal bankruptcy code for states to reorganize, but I'm going to treat state pension funds as separate and distinct enterprises from the state. And if they capsize and they're unable to pay out current beneficiaries, well, then you're just going to have to work that out. The state is going to be under no obligation to right size that pension fund that capsized.
Yes, I don't think that's a plausible legal argument. That will be on the state pension funds are juridically part of the state, and that would be a very activist judge that would do that. So I don't see that as a possibility. The possibilities here are a change in the law that would allow states to go bankrupt. Federal law could be changed in that way, or a constitutional amendment in Illinois that would allow for some revisions in the public pensions, at least for those who are far from retirement. Those are the legal possibilities.
And the constitutional amendment runs into the political reality, which is to say there's no interest. And you make the point, too, there is a ballot initiative that Illinoisans will vote on November 3rd, and that's with respect to amending the Constitution to provide for a graduated state income tax, and how unserious that is as a mechanism to try to deal with Illinois' unpaid bills, not to mention its unfunded liabilities.
Well, indeed, there is another way. You might think that Illinois could succeed even without a pension change, which would be to increase economic growth so much that companies would want to come here. So you'd have a program of deregulation and lower taxes, particularly on the most productive businesses. But of course, this goes in the absolute opposite direction. And that's another sad fact about this administration. That it doesn't seem to be raising the economic growth rate. Right? There's two ways to get out of the problem. You either get rid of your debts or you have such a high economic growth rate that you can pay them off. Those are the two ways, and unfortunately the governor is doing neither, and this policy, the policy of a graduated income tax, is going to lead to a less economic growth, particularly because once you get rid of the requirement of the flat tax, the governor and the legislature are likely to raise taxes even more on a variety of income taxes, including those that they've, with a kind of gimmick, put the taxes down in a minute way to help get this amendment passed. So that's the problem here. There are two ways of helping Illinois, and the governor is taking neither of them.
I know. Obviously, we need more revenue or cut spending somewhere. But has Governor Pritzker done anything, one thing, to improve the business climate here in Illinois?
Well, he did. There has been, to be fair, the legislature's gotten rid of something called a franchise tax, and that is somewhat good. On the other hand, it's going to be swamped by the tax increases promised by this amendment. So there's really been no improvement in the business climate, and you've got to increase growth in Illinois. Illinois is rated 45th in the nation for its growth policies, and so that's really the only way out. If you can't go for a constitutional amendment to change the unfunded pension liabilities, you've got to increase growth. And there's no program to increase growth. The governor's program to increase growth is infrastructure spending, as if that's not going to be dissipated in corruption in this state.
Well, not to mention the idea that government spending is growth-oriented is, Keynesian fantasy. That's what we've been doing for the past 50 years, both parties. It seems to me that the only real way, growing your way out, $130 billion in unfunded liabilities, another 60 or 70 billion in unfunded healthcare liabilities in a state budget that's about $40 billion a year. I mean, you would have to have, this would have to be like a Milton Friedman paradise in terms of growth policy to even start to chip away at those numbers, and that's not going to happen. I wonder if there are any Starve the Beast initiatives that could be moved by the citizenry, because we don't really have a responsive political class except to their own interests. And one of them that's topical now is you're shutting down the schools that you're liquidating my house to pay for my kid's education, or for the education that I paid for long ago for my kid, but I'm still stuck in Illinois. Then I don't want to pay property taxes. What about a property tax revolt and any sort of legal maneuvering that could be done to hold the state accountable for essentially a violation of a contract in a way that we haven't held them accountable under the Constitution to be the majority funder of K through 12 education, which is also a provision in that Illinois Constitution. Like the balanced budget is a provision of that Illinois Constitution. But somehow those provisions don't matter to the Illinois Supreme Court. Only the pension one does. But anyway, property taxes or some other kind of contract action against the state in this era of closed schools.
Well, I think one thing that is going to happen is perhaps a revolt against public sector unions. As you suggest, they seem to be what prevents any kind of constitutional amendment to right-size our pension obligations. But both the police union, because of the shootings, and I think the public school unions are going to be under a lot of pressure. I mean, it's one thing for the public school unions to say, well, we're not going to actually open physically, but they're also really reducing even their online opportunities for learning. And I think parents are going to recognize that really they're not even giving any kind of a service for their money. So I do think there may be a revolt against these unions with special privileges, which I think are at the heart of Illinois' problem. Illinois has very strong public sector unions, and they really have a huge influence in Springfield. And both of these political phenomena, I think, are going to undermine the support that the public has, and in other words, increase the public revulsion for the special privileges of these unions. So I do think that is perhaps a hopeful sign. A last democracy often only moves through crisis, and these two crises, I do think, are a crisis for public sector unions, and it needs to be used to dissipate their power.
Yeah, to borrow from Hillel the Elder, if not now, when? He is John McGinnis, contributing editor of City Journal, George C. Dix Professor of Con Law at Northwestern University. Professor McGinnis, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
Townstone Financial is synonymous with great rates, low closing costs, and phenomenal service to the thousands who have completed purchases and refinances with us since 2002. Hi, my name is Barry Sterner, owner of Townstone Financial. Let's hear about the Townstone experience from one of our customers.
I'm Christopher Nowak, a real estate agent with Castline Properties here in Chicago. We had a really complex deal. Zach Schwartz at Townstone was willing to pick up the phone while he was on vacation in Florida to make sure that this deal got done. Because the one thing that Townstone really focuses on is attention to their clients, attention to their customers, making sure they get the absolute best customer experience possible.
Remember, nobody values your business more than Townstone Financial, and I'm always available to answer your questions. Call me now.